Hello and welcome to the Board Game Barrage podcast, episode number 128. I'm your host, Richard, and with me as always are my co-hosts, Mark, Kellen, and Neelan. Hello everybody.
Hey.
This is our first time on the Board Game Barrage podcast, so...
Yeah, we're glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
You know, and pronunciation is important. And I think if we're going to go forward with this episode, I think we need to do a couple of things. I think we need to make sure everything is pronounced properly, consistently. And, you know, since I am the host with the most, apparently the most, then it's going to be barrage all the way. Get your R's in. R's. You're in my territory now.
That's right.
I hope everybody is well today. I hope everybody is wonderful who is listening as we head our way into the middle of 2020. As we say, this is the wonderful, fabulous 128th episode. How they got so far without having me on the show, I have no idea. But here we are.
Amazing.
Here we are. So, as always, I don't know if we're just going to jump in.
Well, this is the part where I take over from you and then we fight about it. But you're like, no, I'm past that. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for joining us for your first episode of Board Game Barrage. We have always enjoyed your contributions to board gaming and
Thank you.
Your podcast, We're Not Wizards.
Thank you.
Where you debate whether or not someone is a wizard. So I came up with like a list of wizards that I was going to call you, like one each time I referred to you.
Okay.
But I think our internet connection is not good enough between America and wherever the hell you are not in America to make this work. But the first thing you have to do on the Board Game Barrage podcast is tell us what tank color you would like to be.
What color I would like to be. I'm having a big think about this now. I could go for the stereotypical tartan color.
I like that.
Perfect.
Is it a stereotype if I've never heard of it?
And I think that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to go for what you would see on what we would call a shortbread tin. The Royal Stuart tartan.
That helps you, Kellen, right? That clarifies it for Kellen, I'm sure.
Just grab one of your shortbread tins.
I'm going to put a link in the chat so everybody can see it. And then
I want to get Kellen to guess first.
Yeah, guess, Kellen. What do you think tartan is?
Yeah, what do you think tartan is?
There's like an A to B you can get there on this pretty quick.
I agree.
Well, Neelan was nodding his head vigorously as Richard was describing this color. So, I mean, it has the word tart in it, right?
Okay.
Which
Good. You're getting closer.
the thought starter.
Yeah.
So that would indicate to me that it was like a bright or a saturated color, but I'm guessing it's not. Tartan. Nope, I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Like a saturated
I love this.
blue? Tartan.
I love this.
That's actually not a bad guess. You got the Scottish blue maybe in there
Yeah.
a little bit. But
Bit of red, bit of blue.
Maybe. See, the thing is actually a trick question. We are horrifically tricking him because if you said tartan colour, there's a certain kind of stereotypical kind of colour that you would have with tartan. But tartan can be so many colours of the rainbow.
sort of like plaid.
Kind of, yes, but there was official names that were attached to it.
Right.
Because tartan itself never really kind of existed. There was a king's visit, I think in Edinburgh, and they decided to get all the chiefs together. They had a meeting with the king, and they told everybody to dress up in the tartan. And of course, we didn't have the rules and technology, so at that time a lot of tartans were kind of invented and created. So Scottish people, while there are tartans for every name that goes out there, for every family and clan, as they would call them, like the MacDonalds have one, the Stuarts have one, Frasers, you know, every Scottish name has got their own tartan.
Would you know the difference between the tartans just by going over the clan names? Are they that well known?
Some of them are quite well known, but you see, a previous job in a previous life, I used to sell kilts and I used to sell tartan. So I used to get a lot of tourists coming in from America into the shops that we're in, and they came in and they asked what family I'm from. So you used to get folk that come in and saying, you know, I'm from the Gregor, my name's McGregor, I know that I'm from, you know, Scotland, kind of thing. But then you used to get, obviously, people who were kind of from Germany and places like that. And because I was on commission, I generally found them a tartan. With as tenuous a link as possible. It was amazing the number of people that walked away living in various parts of the globe convinced that they were part of some kind of Scottish family. So that was fairly fantastic. So there you go. So tartan can be lots. And so if you have a tartan tank, then you recognize it straight away, and it can be a lot of different colors. So there you go.
Fantastic. I love it. Did you look it up, Kellen?
Well, I did look it up. The problem is that you've made my photoshopping life much more difficult this week.
I'll tell you what I will do is I'm going to send you the link for my actual family tartan.
Perfect.
Oh, great.
I will send you that right now so you can see it, because I'm part of, my family name is actually part of the Fraser clan.
Last question about this before we move on to board games, kind of the purpose of Badaj, but you'd know that after 127 episodes. Can the wizard hat atop the tank also have the same tartan pattern?
No, I'd actually prefer it if you picked, because it's going to be quite garish.
Yes.
As I'm charging into battle against the English with my sword and my staff raised against the Sassenachs, then I would prefer my hat to be of one colour, preferably some kind of maybe a dark red or a dull brown or
adult red.
A dull colour that's going to cover the blood that's obviously going to be running from my head as I get repeatedly smacked across the face.
All right. Today on the Board Game Badaj podcast, we're going to be talking about the power of production. So that's the catchy marketing phrase to talk about production and how it relates to board gaming. Production seems incredibly relevant right now, given that a lot of our board gaming is happening online, and the production part of that is completely absent. So it changes how you interact with games. And so I was reading some interesting comments about production and board gaming, but we will get to that after we cover the games that we have played this week. Richard, we're going to turn it back to you, despite my...
Your protestations.
Yeah, thank you. A smart word. Richard, what have you been playing?
Well, thank you, Vanessa, this week. Actually, I've been shying away from what you would say the big, well-known production-type games. I was sent, a good couple of weeks ago, a copy of a game called Doughnut Dash by the Dark Imp. Now, the Dark Imp, they're not a huge name out there, but they're not like a Kickstarter-type people. But their main drive is to get families playing board games together, and not just kind of normal board games, kind of what you would say, like your Kaplunks and your Monopolies of this world. They're actually interested in getting in a lot of modern concepts and getting families playing them. So I, with a bit of intrepidation, decided to play Doughnut Dash with the family, and I was extremely very much surprised by the number of different concepts that it brought in terms of both kind of board gaming and also educational concepts as well. So I was kind of very, very surprised. The idea behind Doughnut Dash is quite simple, is that you're one of a group of kind of thieves who has decided to invade a factory that makes donuts. And your idea is you're going to try and steal as many donuts as possible. Now, there's a grid of essentially, I think it's 8 by 8 tiles, and each of these will have a wooden disc representing a donut placed upon it. And then on the board itself, the 4 main points of the compass are placed northeast, south, and west. Then you'll be given a small deck of cards, which consists of northeast, south, and west. And then during your turn, what you're going to do is you're going to decide which direction you're going to play in. And then you're going to move your thief in that direction and keep going until you reach a space where it's occupied. That could be a donut, that could contain a thief.
That reminds me, have you played Ricochet Robots, Richard?
To have the same thought, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like Ricochet Robots.
Yeah, there's a lot like that, and it's a very programmable game. So if you're thinking like, say, like Mechs and Minions, I think Robo Rally, games like that. The interesting thing about this is that you're not just controlling one thief, you're actually controlling 2. So sometimes you're trying to select the card which provides you the least. So, you could be like, oh, that's great. If I move this thief east, I'm going to end up collecting this donut that I need. However, what you might not be aware of is if you move your other thief east as well, he's going to end up bouncing off the walls, going in the wrong direction, or maybe collect kind of different, because you get different donuts. You get a pink donut, you get a brown donut, you get a rainbow donut, and you get a ketchup donut. You don't want to collect the ketchup donuts because they're absolutely...
Makes sense.
They're absolutely disgusting. But also, because you think, oh, well, that's it. But then as you're playing, if you go and collect like a brown donut, then you get what you call a Sugar Rush card. Now, a Sugar Rush card has different things that you can bring into play. But if you collect a brown donut, you got to give that Sugar Rush card to the opponent who has collected the least donuts. So it helps to kind of balance it up.
Okay.
But why would you want to try and collect a brown donut? Well, because brown donuts, they're worth the most points at the end of the game. So you collect the most points, but you're also, to counteract that, you're giving away a card which has special powers to the player who's doing the least so they can kind of catch up. And the donuts, as you're collecting the donuts, some of them just give you direct points, but like the rainbow donuts, at the end of the game, if you end up with, say, like 3 rainbow donuts, you don't get any points at all. But if you end up with like 6 or 7, you end up scoring a massive amount of points. So people are kind of...
Like a set collection sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of targeting that. But then as the game goes, you get these sugar rush cards in your possession, and that allows you to do things like, well, move your thief in the opposite direction. Force another player to move their thief in an opposite direction. Make your thief kind of move 90 degrees. So it's adding these kind of extra layers. So what became a very, very simple kind of, well, this is going to be quite a simple family game, moved into something really quite complicated. And I must admit, when I opened the box and I went into this game, I was very, very kind of, how good can a kind of an educational game be? But I was really, really pleasantly surprised with the depth on it. The difficulty you've always got with a kids game is, could you take that kids game, could you put it in front of a room of 4 or 5 adults, and could they have a reasonable time? And a lot of kids games kind of, yeah, they're fun, but let's go move on to something a bit deeper.
Yeah.
With Doughnut Dash, there was enough strategy in there as you are playing kind of sugar rush cards, which you can play every time, as you're trying to get your thief to go a different way from one thief. There's kind of like reflector boards on the board which send your thief going in another direction. There's other boards that stop your thief kind of going straight ahead. So it kind of build up in kind of strategy and ideas which really kind of had you thinking. So there was spatial awareness there was planning there was programming there. I was really, really impressed. Really, really impressed with it.
I'm looking at the game on BGG now, and it does have like a look of Ricochet Robots, which is one of my favorite games, so you've certainly piqued my interest. A couple questions. Did you say you play this with your kids?
Yes. I played it with my wife and my son.
And the rules weren't an issue? It was a pretty simple...
No. The only thing that was a little bit of an issue was, I think the Sugar Rush cards themselves, some of them were a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Until you were kind of used to kind of like the spatial awareness of where everything goes. And it didn't make any sense until you were actually playing the game.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Do the Sugar Rush cards, like when you're talking about the game, it sounds great. It sounds like a game I'd be interested in playing. The one thing that I'm sort of apprehensive about is the Sugar Rush cards. Do they inject too much randomness? Or maybe that's something you want with like a family game where you can have somebody...
No, what it does is it actually injects much needed kind of randomness and different tactics into it. Because otherwise... you would be playing your north card, then your south card, then your west card, then your east card. And what some of the Sugar Rush cards do, they say, okay, well, once you've played your directional card, you can't play it again until you've played your other 3 cards. So what some of these Sugar Rush cards done is if you've played east, you could then play a Sugar Rush card to say, I'm going to bring my east card back into my hand so I could play it on another turn. So there's a lot of tactics like that. I was just very, very pleasantly surprised by it.
I'm legitimately interested in this. It seems really like up my alley. You know, I could see myself playing this with like nieces. It'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the thing about it is that the Dark Imp are putting together actual packs of games. So they've got mini games that they put out on kind of like coasters as well. So when I got sent the game, there was a little coaster of the game, a little miniature, smaller game that you could play, which was on the back of like a beer mat, I guess. You know, I don't know if coaster is a term.
Coaster works.
Yeah.
Coaster works.
Coaster works. I
beer
don't know.
Mat does not
Ellen
work,
is just like, yeah, exactly. Why are you playing a beer mat game with your kids? It's like, because they can't go out and have a cigarette yet. But no, so the Dark Imp kind of specialise in producing kind of like these little boxes of kind of fun with several activities, board game activities. And I guess whereas we would do the work of saying, let's bring in somebody and let's let them play Carcassonne or Catan or a simple game for them to play like King Domino or something like that. They're doing the clever work of actually saying to parents, okay, here's something which is completely new, which isn't just taking a complicated game and making it simplified to make it a kid's version. They're introducing a kind of a lot of concepts. So yeah, hats off to them basically. I really enjoyed what they had to offer.
Looks very cool.
A very important question. Mm-hmm. How do you spell the word donut in Doughnut Dash?
That is a good question.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, there's a wrong way to spell it, so I'm hoping that you get it right.
Well, see, it depends because, and this is the interesting thing, because I reviewed this game, so I did a write-up for it, and I was spelling it Donut. However, the game itself is Doughnut. And you can shake your head all you want, Kellen.
How do you guys normally spell donut? I was actually going to ask this because I am a UGH guy. I'm a dough nut guy.
Well, it's definitely a nut made out of dough. So there's no two ways about
totally.
it, you know. Yeah.
Okay, because I see people spell it without the UGH.
For whatever this is worth, I don't even know this is true, but I've always seen the DONUT as more of an American thing. Like, I don't think I ever really saw that back home.
And then you assimilated, and you've been spelling it the proper way ever since.
Absolutely not. I leave in all the requisite U's at all times.
You go without the UGH, Kellen?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Randy's Donuts? Famous place in Los Angeles with a giant sign.
I've not been there myself, so, you know, I can't confess. But this is another thing where you guys can't you're lazy spelling. This is how could we shorten and take letters out a completely normal and welcome word. And then you realize that you couldn't just take the U out of donut, because then you would end up with Doughnut. So you had to take out the U, the G, and the H, because you had to sacrifice letters that way in order to keep your illiterate way of bastardizing the English language.
Well, I'm a UGH guy.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, yeah.
Have you seen the sign, Mark?
I have seen the sign. It was probably like a per letter thing. It cost them like you want to keep the letter count down. You're in advertising, Kellen. You know about this kind of stuff.
Now, that letter cost an extra $57,000.
That's right, exactly.
Yep.
This is not the alliance that I thought I would lose, is the three of you on Donut versus me. But I'll accept it as long as it's the only one we have in the next hour. Neelan, what have you been playing this week?
So I've not been playing a whole lot, but there is a game that I've had like 2 or 3 rounds of online on, I think it's Bertageux actually, and I could not tell you
BGA?
offhand how to pronounce that. No, it's a French site, German site, I'm not sure to be honest. So the game that I've been playing is Cities. This is by Martin F. It's a game from 2008. It is a very simple tile laying game that is one of those Karuba games where, like, it's bingo-esque in that someone draws one thing and then everyone places the same tile. So it theoretically scales to any number of players, and I believe in BTJ the implementation is quite a bunch of players. Every tile is a square tile that's divided into
That's a metric, right? Quite a bunch of players.
Quite a bunch.
That equals.
It's a very precise number. So every tile in the game is a square tile divided into 4 quarters with one of 4 different types of landmass on it, like 4 different colors. So there's parks, there's water, there's attractions and terraces. And without going into the way that each of those scores, because it's fairly involved depending on the rule set you're playing with, but on a turn, someone will draw one, and then everyone finds the same identical tile in their stack, and they place it simultaneously. At the end of the game, you've built a 4x4 grid of all these different areas, and throughout the game, at the end of each of your turns, you can choose to place one of your 7 tourists. And then at the end of the game, where the tourists are in those areas is going to give you a certain number of points. So some of the zones, for example, will score just based on how big they are. So if you have a park that's like 7 tiles big and a tourist in the middle of it, that's going to score 7 points. But you can't double up tourists in a single zone, so you sort of have to be quite precise about the timing of where you place your tourists, because you can only place them on the most recently played tile. There are a couple of other rules where you can like move to tourists and teleport them around, but it's more limited. So you finding the right time to like place your tourists and be like, okay, this is where it's going to go and this is where it's going to score the most points at the end of the game is a lot of what the game is. And there's sort of other fun stuff, like some zones will score based on how many parks and water they can see from their position. So once you've like internalized all the scoring conditions, it's kind of trying to figure out the optimal way to build your map and place your tourists so that at the end of the game you score the most points. It's pretty simple. I dig it. I think it's a game I would probably enjoy in real life as much as I have on BTJ. And yeah, I'm going to probably keep playing more of it.
And what possessed you to play that? Because it doesn't sound, it's pretty run-of-the-mill from the sounds of it. Like, what made you go, this is what I want to seek out on this weird French website?
There was an open call to be like, there's this very small game that we can all learn very quickly. And then I think it was, our first game was like 7 or 8 of us. So, in the space of 5 minutes, we had all learned the rules independently. And then we're playing this game asynchronously or like over the course of a day. So it just kind of like sprung up randomly. Like I hadn't even heard of it prior to that.
Seems like it has like a little bit of a Carcassonne.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, I've actually not played Carcassonne, but like it's definitely like in that ballpark of you have a tile, now play it.
So, Neelan, you recommend Cities over Carcassonne, right?
Absolutely. As of right now, Cities is substantially better than Carcassonne.
It's funny. I hadn't heard of this game. I just looked it up on BGG, and I have heard of the game that was a re-implementation of it. It's called Limes.
Okay.
Which is always stuck in my head. I never knew like the rules. All I knew is it was called limes and had nothing to do with limes.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if it's like a trois thing where it's like actually Lime or
That's
something.
like
and it's
the name of the city or something.
Yeah.
I like the idea that it's just limes.
Right. But that sounds nice and quick.
Yeah.
How long?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's hard to gauge because I've not played it except asynchronously, but like I can't imagine it would take more than 10 minutes, 10, 15. Like it's a very quick filler game. And I think it's quite good for like how simple it is. It's very much scratching that itch of games I like, of that sort of like puzzly. It's got a little bit of that push your luck in it, right? Which is like, okay, I should put this tourist now, but maybe if I wait, I might get more of it later. And, I like that. It's a combination of two simple elements that I like a lot, and I think it works quite well.
I will say I'm looking at pictures of cities here, and talk about a game that could use a production bump.
That is, yes, totally. Pretty relevant for our topic, actually, accidentally, because, it's definitely not a looker.
I would say if you like what Nealon is saying, go ahead and get limes, because limes looks a whole lot nicer than cities.
Yeah, it looks like it's been coloured in crayon.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's not a good look.
So that is Cities by Z-Man Games and Martin F.
So Christina and I have played a few games this week. We played Noosefjord at 2-player, which was awesome. Great Uwe Rosenberg game. But the one that I wanted to talk about was a game I received from the Board Game Barrage math trade, which is Azul 2, Stained Glasses of Sintra. I don't know why it needs stained glass and it needed Sintra. It's like, I don't know, just call it Azul 2 or More Azul or Too Fast 2 Azul. There's a lot of good things you could say here, and none of them I just said. But this is the gamer sequel to Azul, which is another fantastic puzzle little game. In Azul 2, you use the same methodology of picking tiles, which is there are a series of hops, and when you pick a color, you take all of the tiles of that color and dump the rest of the tiles in the center. And so you're kind of hate drafting back and forth with another player, because you may really want that one red tile, but if you take that, you're going to expose 3 blue tiles that you know your opponent wants. But it replaces the placement aspect of original Azul with this new system of columns that you are placing the tiles into. The main mechanism, these columns have different colors, and those color tiles must go there, but you have a little worker on top of the columns, and the worker can only move to the right. So I'm not sure what kind of deficiency this man has where he can only move in one direction. But once you pass a column, you can't put tiles into columns that precede it. So even though you might have 4 orange openings and 4 orange tiles that you could grab, because your worker has already passed that column, you're unfortunately stuck. And so instead of taking a tile, you can decide to move your man back to the beginning to reset your position. And so what the game turns into is actually really looking at where your opponent's guy is along the columns and going, oh my God, I can leave those 4 clear tiles because she can't even get to them. She's going to have to reset if she wants to take any more clear tiles. So it kind of, in a funny way, replaces some of the tension that I love from base Azul, because really it's all about hate drafting those tiles, and like where you place them is clever and interesting, but not really. In this game, it's way more about the placement of that guy. It's where that guy is in the columns. It's how you react against it. And there's so many great moments where Christina notices that she could take a bunch of great tiles, but unfortunately she's gone too far and she has to reset. But I've set up that combo, which is why I got her and won the game in a huge landslide. Oh, she's not here anymore. I was trying to play up by how much I won. Azul 2, Stained Glasses of Sintra. Interestingly enough, there's A and B sides to the scoring, and talking with some members of the Board Game Barrage community, someone mentioned that the side that I played, side A, was their least favorite Azul variant of Azul 1, Azul 2, and Azul 3, and side B, the other variant, is their favorite.
Interesting.
So Azul Sintra side B, number 1, Azul Sintra side A, the worst. And I was struck, I think, by Noosefjord versus Azul 2, which is that Noosefjord took like 20 or 30 minutes to punch out, to set up, to get going, and another 20 minutes to teach, and is an amazing Uwe game. I absolutely love it. I think it'll be in my top 50 when we redo that this year. But Azul Sintra, by comparison, had so much of the tension and back and forth and fun. And we opened the box, I read the rules, and we were playing in 7 or 8 minutes probably. And I think that that's such a fantastic thing.
Right.
I was really impressed with Azul Sintra, and I thought I was going to be like, oh, it's Azul again. But I was surprised and very excited to have it.
Is it the possibility that the meeple worker that couldn't go left was Zoolander?
Yes.
It is possible. I'm not sure if he can make stained glass windows in Sintra. Where is that a location? I assume it must be. It's like Limes, right? A location.
I think it could be. Yeah, that was my first question. My second question was, you mentioned you heard about this through the community. So where's this community, Kellen?
Funny you should ask. It is at boardgamebarrage.com/discord. So go to boardgamebarrage.com/discord and join the community.
Well, I'm glad somebody actually picked that up.
I'm looking at you like, okay, I don't know if he knows what a question is. I'm like, okay, there must be lag happening right now because, oh, wow. Nice job, Richard. I think the TT Wizard is kind of where I've settled on your nickname for the Tartan Tank Wizard.
I'm quite happy with that. I'll be quite happy to retire as the Tartan Tank Wizard. I think there might be actually a Scottish Tank Regiment as well. Oh my goodness, is there a Scottish Tank Regiment? I am acquiring minds.
And do they paint their tanks in tartan pattern?
They don't obviously paint their tanks.
Okay. Let's get the children back in order. So the people in Doughnut Dash, right, it would be one adult and 3 children. That was the 3 of you. That was the joke that I could have made, but you guys just kept going and going. Yeah. Do you have any questions about Azul, Sintra, besides... Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
I'm just trying to get everybody happy. I'm just balancing. So it sounds like this is your favorite version of Azul. I take it you haven't played Summer Pavilion?
I have not played Summer Pavilion, but the initial thought I had after doing this was, wow, I must play Summer Pavilion.
Okay.
I need to play Sintra more because I do think it de-emphasizes a little bit the hops and what you're doing there in a way that I don't love.
Yeah.
I did love the game. I loved it.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, that's clear. That you're very clear about that.
I've got to be honest, this is one of those cases where like my propensity for reading rules kind of made me a little bit dismissive about the game, because like my take after only having read the rules was like, this seems like Azul with more steps. And I'm glad to see that that's maybe was very dismissive, but I should absolutely try this for sure. I love Azul.
Neil, what happened when you read the rule book for Blue Lagoon?
Exactly the same reaction, come to think of it.
And then what happened to Blue Lagoon later that year?
Yeah, it became Board Game Barrage's Game of the Year. So
boom.
And favorite filler game of all time.
Exactly.
That's right. Exactly.
But I think that's a lesson for all of us, really, isn't
it? It's weird because it made me go, I could have both of these. And usually I'm the guy that reduces the collection and says, no, you only need one rule set. But because the game could be learned in 10 minutes or less, I think I got over my thought that you need to simplify that. And so I want to have both Azuls. Now, I do think this one is not as attractive looking. It has translucent tiles. I think they goofed on the landing of that. It looks good when you put light under it and then you photograph it with a really expensive camera and put it on Instagram at instagram.com/boardgamebarrage. But yeah, I think Azul original is much more striking.
I've never played it. I've never played Azul.
Oh, none of them.
I've never ever played Azul, and the only reason why was that when Azul kind of came out and it was really, really big and popular, it was really difficult to get hold of a copy. And then so you put it to the background and you forget about it, you know?
Yeah.
As someone for whom like family games will have more appeal than any of the 3 of us, like I think this would be a really good one. Like it's quite accessible and quite broad in its appeal, I would say. I don't know that I've met anyone that sort of disliked it on first play.
No, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't through like a dislike or through any kind of negativity. The reason that I didn't get my hands on a copy was that it became in short supply, which meant the prices went through the roof, and then you're in that thing where can I justify spending this amount of money when I know if I wait kind of 6 months is going to be an awful lot cheaper. So at the end of the day, I ended up not kind of waiting, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's probably one of these things that I'll get back to. Goodness knows when, but I'll get back to it sometime, I guess.
Yeah. And it's a game I feel like it's a game that's like a modern evergreen to the extent which you'll never have to worry about it being out of stock or hard to get. So I think you're fine.
Funnily enough, I was just looking on Amazon at Azul. I've purchased it 4 times, and all 4 of those orders were gifts for other people. Very, very great thing, like as a Christmas present, or I gave it as a wedding present twice, I think, to different couples, because it's just enough. They look at it and they go, oh my God, it's so pretty. And it's just a twist on like a Target game, though we do love Target.com and all Target subsidiary.
And it is sold at Target.
Thank you, Mark.
Are you sponsored by Target?
Not officially. They don't know it.
There's a legal hullabaloo going on.
We'll have to cut that part. Mark?
Yes, sir.
Why don't you tell us about the Spiel des Jahres nominee that you have been playing?
I played the illustrious Spiel des Jahres nominee by the one and only True Living Doctor. Is that what we say? I forget what we say.
Only True and Living.
God, Mark, get it
you
right.
Have to cut
Jeez.
this.
Don't you have your show Bible?
You have to know this.
I have not been reading my show Bible as much as I should, as much as Kellen demands. So I played L.L.A.M.A. This is the second time I'd ever played it. The first time was when the 3 of us played it before our world famous Spiel des Jahres preview episode that has gone down in history books. So when we played it, we sort of left thinking like, oh, there's not really much here. Why did this get nominated for the Spiel and all this stuff? So I played it just recently with family. I was visiting family and actually had a pretty great time playing it. For those who don't know how L.L.A.M.A works, it's really, for lack of a term, sort of like a Uno style game where there's a pile of cards in the center of the table, a discard pile. You have a hand of cards that go from 1 to llama, so everybody knows that scale. For those who don't know, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 llama, clearly. And then on your turn, when it comes around to you, you can either play a card on the discard pile that matches the number on the pile or one above it. So if it comes around to me and the number is 2, I can play any of my 2 cards or a 3 card. And then you go all the way up to llama, and then it cycles back to 1. So if there's a llama out there, you can play a llama or a 1. What you're trying to do is get rid of your cards, because it's a golf style game in terms of scoring where a higher score is bad. You're earning negative points. And the number of negative points you earn is, at the end of a round, or whatever cards you have in your hand, you'll get negative points equal to the value on the card. Anyway, I think what made this play of it a lot better for us is that it was just like a changed expectation. You know, when we played it the first time, at least for me, we were thinking, okay, Spiel game from Knizia, like, it's got to be like brilliant. It's got to have all this stuff to it. And we were sort of let down. This time I went in knowing that it's a sort of a simple to teach, straightforward card game with a couple twists, and it was very easy for me to teach my family, and we just had a great time. A lot of laughter, a lot of like push your luck vibes going on, which is always fun. And the one thing that this game has that I find myself sort of attracted to in games is the idea of withdrawal, like premature withdrawal. Insert your jokes there. Okay, a little pause. Anyway, the idea that if you think you're going to lose, you can quit out of a round. See, I'm edgy also. I can go all the way. I got the entire spectrum of jokes.
It's really easy to be funny when you do all the timing of the podcast because you edit it.
I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah, you insert dramatic pauses. You make me sound like clumsy and awkward, but everyone knows that's not true.
Some editing is easier to do than others. Anyway, so yeah, I like Airland and Sea, the idea that if you feel like you're losing or you feel like you're in a bad spot, you can bow out and take less of a hit. For some reason, that idea that you don't have to keep playing to the bitter end is appealing to me, and that was something that came out in this last play of L.L.A.M.A. So still not a ringing endorsement for L.L.A.M.A. It's still fairly straightforward, but there are enough interesting twists to it, and it's easy enough to teach that I think for a family game night, you know, maybe start with L.L.A.M.A. and then end your family night with a game of Doughnut Dash, and I think you'll be having a good time. So that is L.L.A.M.A. by Rainer Knizia.
I think I would be keen to revisit it. I just feel like I can't help but feel like it just suffered by the comparison to Push, which we had played around the same time, which is also like a push your luck, Uno-esque, but not really.
Sure. I think it holds up to Push, frankly.
Okay.
It may not be as good, but I just think the Spiel thing killed it, at least for me in that first game, because I was like, I kept looking for
the magic. Yeah.
And there's not really there. It's just a Knizia solid, easy to teach sort of game that it works. It works. Okay. Solid.
You described it, Mark, I'm taking notes, as Uno style as well as golf style. Would you say that it also is a L.L.A.M.A. style game?
Yeah, I would say if I was going to mathematically break this game down, I would say 33% golf, 33% Uno, 32% L.L.A.M.A., and 2% magic.
That's very precise.
Yeah.
I was
I'm nothing
desperately hoping that would add up to more than 100. So that would you. I was trying to do the math, and I'm like, oh, he's going too fast. All right. We're going to cut out the part where Richard keeps saying, you asked for this, you asked me on over and over again, and get right. Let's get right to our featured topic. The featured topic today is the power of production. I wanted to share a comment with you guys and get your reactions to hit off this topic. I was reading someone who was talking about the Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is an interesting push your luck game. And they said, the game is good, but the game gets better when you add the Geek Bit set from Board Game Geek. And so for those that don't know, you can upgrade the game with these plastic pieces instead of the cardboard. And because the game is so much of putting your hand in a bag, rifling around, pulling it out, it elevates the experience. Now, when I read this comment, my first reaction was to dismiss it and say, there's a difference between the game, like the game didn't get better, right? The game exists separately from its production. So what I want from each of you is, do you agree or disagree? Is the production something different than the game? Or when we're discussing a board game, is production so intrinsically linked? There's a big word. Is the production so intrinsically linked that it's the same thing, and thereby buying a Geek Up bit set for Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is available for $42 on BoardGameGeekstore.com/product/geekup-bit-set-quacks-of-Quedlinburg. Well, that's going to ruin the question, so we probably remove Mark. Is there a difference between those two things, or are they the same thing, and you could buy this to make the game better?
For me, they are two separate things. I think the bits don't make the game better. They make the experience better. So for me, I would say that there is a differentiation.
Yeah.
I have one very simple counterpoint. Azul with cardboard chits.
It doesn't change the game. I mean, it might...
But, you've lost, 90% of the appeal of Azul, in my opinion.
Okay, I think that's quite high.
I think that...
He's good at numbers too, Neil, and he just got to 100.
To be clear, I don't think that that's to say that Azul's strength is not 10% game design, 90% production. To be clear.
Right.
But it's one of those sum of its parts things, right? I think if you take away the production entirely, you've severely reduced the game to less than the part that you've lost. If that makes sense.
And I think I would say that when you're buying a game, you're not only buying it for the quality of the game, which I think is not improved by adding the bits, but you're buying it for the quality of the experience it provides. So, I mean, maybe it's a semantic thing, but I don't think that adding these flares add to the quality of the game.
No, I mean, not to the quality of the game. I mean,
sure.
Well, okay. I do think that there are points I would disagree with even with that, honestly. But I think you're right in the case of Azul to some extent, where yes, I think if the game was cardboard shirts, obviously the game wouldn't change mechanically because there's not a component to that game that requires the tactility. But I still think that the tactility is a big part of the reason I recommend Azul to people.
That's fair. No, of course. Definitely. Absolutely. I would not quarrel with that.
I think there's a part of this in relation to the Quacks of Quedlinburg, you going back to saying, well, this is something that you can purchase, is that I think when you're improving a board game or adding on to the existing production, there's two lines you can go down this. You can go down the Quacks of Quedlinburg line, which is you obviously have some kind of emotional enjoyment invested in this game to make you spend that money in order to improve it because you're enjoying that game already. I wouldn't imagine, unless somebody was already kind of well, when I get something, I'm just going to go out and buy all the additional components. I think normally somebody, if they were enjoying Quacks of Quedlinburg and somebody says, hey, look, you can improve the production, you can improve the game by getting these additional tokens, I think they wouldn't just go out and buy it unless they enjoyed playing the game already. On the flip side of that, I've heard of a lot of people who have gone out and had bought the Gloomhaven organizer for the box, quite simply because organizing Gloomhaven itself was a very, very tricky thing to do. And this was something they almost had to buy in order to help improve their overall experience. So I think there's a couple of things where people will buy stuff in order to bling up their copy, but they've got emotional investment in there. And then there's the other side of it where people will go out and they will, through no fault of their own, have to buy an additional component to add on the game in order to make it kind of easier to play and encourage it. And I think that depends on the game itself, because Gloomhaven itself goes for $100.
Right. And like you said, you could make the argument that the production of Gloomhaven, despite its expense, is still lacking because mechanically there is stuff that is deficient about it because of how fiddly that is. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So this is interesting for me, Mark, because I believe that my opinion was closest to Mark's prior to seeing this comment and really pondering and thinking about it. And I think I've about faced almost 100%, which is that the game, to me, is a series of mechanisms, or I used to feel that way, and now I'm not so sure. And Mark, my counterpoint and question to you is, like, let's switch gears to video games for a hot second. Like, the graphics of a video game are 1,000,000% a part of the game, right? If the game's graphics were twice as bad, that would make the game worse.
Yes, I would. Yeah, that's fair.
And so I know I saw you do the math in your head for twice as bad. So, whether that's a 50% reduction.
Actually, 48%. I think you'll actually find if you do the maths properly.
And so I'm just struck by this idea that the game is the production. Like, the physical object is the game. And how you interact with that, and we'll get to Tang Garden in a minute because I know Richard and I have both played it, but many parts of that production process hurt the set of mechanisms. So it's the interlocking of the mechanisms, the game, and how accessible it is even. And so, Neil and I'd love to get your take on this. Congrats on Last of Us 2 launching. I'm sleep deprived and 12 hours in, and that's a beautiful game and production, but is there a difference here, or how do you see this?
I think that it's actually kind of an interesting adjacent topic, and I think it would vary depending on whom you ask and the sort of video game you're talking about. But The Last of Us and the sort of storytelling games we do, I would absolutely agree with you, where if you are not getting the same connection that you would get through a well-realized world, the story actually suffers for it. And I'm talking about the way that the story is presented to you, the way it's told, the way characters emote and express. Like, that is all part and parcel of the presentation and is part of what sells the world and the believability of the story to you. But there are definitely people that would argue, all games should be pixel graphics and mechanics are what matter, and we've not advanced since Super Mario Brothers. And I understand that, and I think that's closer to where the Mark argument is that yes, you can layer on all of this fluff, but you're not changing what's actually fundamentally good about the game. And I have a hard time with that because I think it's quite dismissive of a lot of the work that production and sound and graphics actually do to you as an emotive experience. It affects the way you feel about the game, whether you realize it or not.
I think for me, it is like, this is more of a semantic argument because I will say it like that. At one point, I was games should just be the bare bones. Like, all this other stuff is like just getting in the way. Like, just use black and white and we're good to go. And I've definitely softened on that quite a bit, but I still have a hard time saying that is a difference in the quality of the game more than the quality of the experience. And if I got a chance to buy a copy of Azul without the tiles, or if I got a chance to play Splendor without the chips, it would be a much worse experience. There's no doubt about it. And it might go from a game that I'm interested in playing to a game that I'm no longer interested in playing. That's for sure. But to call that an improvement in gameplay doesn't feel right to me. And I will say, to counter the video game thing, I think there's a level of immersion that you want or that you require from a video game that is not as required in a board game, or in some board games. Like there is like hey, Cthulhu Wars, this is my army, this is my monster, and that is definitely an added benefit to those games. But I think as a whole, when it comes to video games, if you don't have that immersion, you're losing a lot. That is a much bigger minus to a video game than it would be to a board game. That lack of feeling like you're part of it or getting wrapped up in the world.
I think there's also like an audience perspective thing. I don't know, Richard, I know that the other two don't do tabletop role-playing games at all. Do you do any like tabletop role-playing or anything like that?
I've done a little bit. And I think my take on this is basically that good graphics will draw somebody in at the beginning, but ultimately it'll be the gameplay that keeps somebody going. I review video games on occasion as well, and there was a game I reviewed quite recently that looked like the backgrounds and the environments looked absolutely amazing, but the gameplay and the way the main gameplay worked was just dreadful, and no amount of stunning sunsets and amazing environmental works changed my opinion into me all of a sudden enjoying the game just because it looked absolutely fantastic.
I think that's valid. And the reason I bring up the role-playing thing is because obviously those are games where all you have are the mechanics and everything about the immersion experience is like theater of the mind, right? And I think that works for some people. And I know that quite specifically, it doesn't work for me. I require more of an entry point, like something like seeing, as much as I don't love like thematic Ameritrash games as my first point of entry into board games, when you see like something like Nemesis with like dark corridors and alien miniatures, there is something about that is inviting to me, that sort of brings me into the space more than it would without.
I just want to defend my credentials here because I was a big time role-playing guy in my younger years.
I didn't know that, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I ran so many different role-playing systems.
The theater in his mind is so big.
Expansive.
So many theaters in his mind.
It's an IMAX. It's an IMAX in there. So I appreciate the whole immersing yourself in a world thing. But yeah, even then, like, there were role-playing systems that were clearly better than others. And, you know, there is a mathematical or sort of like foundational thing that was important. GURPS, I played GURPS. You guys ever heard of GURPS?
I have heard of GURPS.
Thank you, Theater Brain.
Only from a video game perspective, actually. Fallout is built on GURPS, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The original Fallout.
Like how?
Yeah.
I didn't know GURPS was a video game.
No. I mean, it's a role-playing system, but the combat system, or rather the mechanic system behind Fallout, the original Fallout, is based on GURPS.
Have you heard of D&D? That's a theater in my mind.
I have. I read.
All right.
Listen, I got to say this. This is a story real quick. I convinced a teacher in middle school to let us stay in her class during lunch so I could run a D&D campaign. So
and the entire class stayed behind, and then they all clapped for you and did a standing ovation, right?
I didn't want to make the story too long, so I didn't want to go into the whole thing, but you filled in the gaps for me, so I appreciate that, Kellen.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Let's get back to our scheduled programming. One of the questions that I asked for us to prepare some games that we consider to be overproduced, produced just right, or underproduced, whereby the components don't live up to the gameplay that exists within it. And overproduced obviously meaning more production than is necessary to articulate the game that exists there.
I'm going to start off, and I'm going to start off with GKR heavy hitters, because it's not really a game that you could replace the robots really easily with standees. This is an entire game which is a spectacle, and it kind of commands a certain kind of table presence. It kind of toes a line very, very nicely between somebody going, oh, this is overproduced rubbish, to being actually, this is really, really functional, and this is exactly what this game kind of needs. You are going about a city, you do need this kind of the city presence. You are fighting off against different size robots, and the robots themselves have, again, this wonderful, amazing kind of pre-painted kind of table presence kind of there. So while I feel it is a smorgasbord of showboatishness, it's not overproduced, is that it does, in terms of the actual components, there's not a massive amount of components there. And it's probably not much more than what you would see in a normal kind of miniatures type of role-playing game. It did fall into kind of my general thoughts on production, which is, I think one of the things we need to consider when we're talking about production in any sense is how the actual product itself is funded. Because I was looking for correlation between the games that I picked, which I thought were overproduced, and the games that I thought kind of maybe could do with a little bit of excess blinging or got it exactly right. And all the games that were overproduced were Kickstarter ones. And they were very, very well-funded Kickstarter ones. And it was almost as if somebody had the base game, the retail version, and then they had to spend all this money to justify the fact that they were funded up the kazoo to the size of like six figures. So the ones that I've seen, the examples that I've seen, were generally all kind of very, very well kind of funded Kickstarters that were bling for bling's sake, that smashed multiple stretch goals. And they went over and above the kind of the general substance for the game. But for me, JKR Heavy Hitters was definitely a game I thought was very, very well produced, but didn't step over the mark.
GKR Heavy Hitters is one I've always looked at, and I want to kind of compare it to Cthulhu Wars for a second. Cthulhu Wars is my big example of a game that on the surface is overproduced. Every expansion is at least $50. These miniatures are ridiculously big. It is a Kickstarter success. But the underlying gameplay, I've always described it as it's better than it has any right to be. because I thought it was going to be this Kickstarter monstrosity. But in actuality, it's a tight, engaging game with a core system that I love sharing with people. I love this game. And now that it's been successful, right? Now that they made that overproduced, successful version, I think they could transition and make the gamer version of this, that's $70, that's standees with all the expansions and all the factions in it. And I think it could be a success today. I think it could be. I don't know that it could have been when it came out because so many miniature painters supported the game. So many people got into it because of how exciting it looked. So I wondered with GKR Heavy Hitters, if we replaced your version of it now with the $40 version with standees, you would continue to play it? You feel like the game is good enough, but it took the production to get you there?
I think it would lose something if you replaced it with standees because of the way it is. And because your team consists of about 3 robots. So it's not like you're putting kind of like 15 or 16 different models on the table. You can have a game with like 2 players and there can only be like 6 models on the entire table. So I think if you reduce that down just to standees, it's one of the few games that I have actually seriously considered buying. There is extra pimp that you can buy for it, which changes certain things on colour and adds in additional kind of units and stuff like that as well. And it's one of the few that I've considered buying it because I just think that once I had it set out on the table, it would be absolutely fantastic. I have always wondered about things like Cthulhu Wars and similar games, if they would benefit from having like almost like a cheaper kind of, you can still have the experience. Because again, it goes back to what we said about, if the gameplay is very, very good, then vastly reducing certain components should be kind of fine. But I think GKR Heavy Hitters, for me, I don't know if you maybe would lose. It requires the kind of the magnificence on the table, I think, to kind of give that a little bit. And everything else is fairly kind of standard,
So, Kellen, I'm surprised to hear you say that you think that Cthulhu Wars would hold up. And again, none of the mechanics would change, but Cthulhu Wars strikes me as a game that I would be less inclined to play. Even though I love it, I would be less inclined to play it substantially if it was down to counters or down to standees.
Price?
Yeah, price, obviously, but it feels like such an experiential game, Cthulhu Wars, that losing that would be a severe blow.
Yeah, I'm about to play it online, actually, on Tabletop Simulator. I'm trying to organize a group within the Discord to play it. So I'll let you know. I would love, it takes up so much space in my closet.
Yeah.
It was insanely expensive. If you could give me the $80 version that has everything in 1 or 2 boxes, I would trade it in a heartbeat.
Really?
Yeah.
This is fascinating to me. So if there was here's a good example. Would you take Cthulhu Wars in the form of Gloomhaven in terms of the quality of production?
Yes.
Really? And
if the box insert made it easy to
sure.
Out, but yeah.
Right. Because that's not an issue with Cthulhu Wars. But if you had like the same standees and the same level of components, you're fine with that.
100%.
Wow.
And that may be that I don't really care about Cthulhu, Mr. Cthulhu and friends.
Right.
Like I don't get anything from the grim, gross darkness of it. Yeah. I like seeing how big they are. I tried to paint them. That was a failure that I'll never show anyone. But it's interesting because I feel like the difference between this Cthulhu Wars versus GKR Heavy Hitters, like I feel like we are saying the game is the production and Mark just doesn't want to admit it out loud.
I mean, the whole Cthulhu Wars thing would be like, if there's going to be an exception to my argument, although it doesn't feel like an exception to me, but this is like
a Cthulhu exception.
Right.
That's official.
That's in law books. No, Cthulhu Wars without the standees, without the like overproduction of it, feels like less of a game to me. It feels like less of an experience.
Warhammer 40,000 is something to me which entirely exists in my capability to say that Warhammer 40,000 is a thing that I love. It's entirely because of the miniatures and because of the presentation of it. Like, Warhammer 40,000 doesn't exist as a game with only lore and only rules. Like, picturing a Space Marine and picturing a Tyranid and picturing armies on a tabletop like that.
And a tartan tank.
Yes, exactly. And tartan Space Marines in their kilts. I mean, that is the game to me. And the thing is, again, like, that's not to dismiss that it's a solid rule set and it's a fun experience mechanically to have. But like, again, I'll say it, like, it loses 90% of the appeal despite still being solid in all
out
other
of 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm keeping track of the percentages. Don't worry about it.
And it is funny because, like, like, you could remove the miniatures and you could replace 140k with standees and you would still have a fun game, but it wouldn't be a game I would be interested in.
No, I think the same thing would go with like Azul. I think Azul stripped down to cardboard chits is much less attractive and perhaps I don't know. I think Azul still would hold up. I still like to play Azul without the tiles.
I think you're actually right. The Azul example may be bad, and I think if we had been presented with Azul without knowing the alternative, we would have still thought this is rad, right? But
right, sort of like Nova Luna. Nova Luna is a game where the components aren't great, but the game holds up.
So why don't you guys share some examples of games where the production has made baffling decisions or has made a significant impact on your perception of that game?
Castles of Burgundy was the classic example of a game where everybody said, if you make a better production of it, I would buy 100 copies of it or whatever. And then they did make a second version of it, and everybody disliked it. Not everybody. Some people, I guess, do like the second edition. But it's just, Castle of Burgundy is so weird to me that it's like the game that people were clamoring for a second version, and then it came out, and it sort of feels like it's flopped. I don't know if the numbers would back that up or not. But another game in that sort of same vein is Container. Container feels like such a weird game. It's like a game where the production is like both high end and super low end. And it struck me as like a sort of strange outlier in the whole production thing, because the island in Container is like basically a sheet of paper with like clip art graphics. It's very, very like low quality. You feel like you could print it up like at your local Kinko's. But then the ships are like this huge, I don't know if they're pewter or whatever, these huge, massive things. And it just struck me as such a weird high-low thing. Those are a couple games that just, when I was researching the list, just struck me as like really odd ducks.
I think recently we talked about Tang Garden. I don't know if you've revisited, if you did actually just put that, because I remember listening to the episode, because I do listen, because I appreciate at least 78% of your voices. But did you, at the time, I think, Kellen, what you said about Tang Garden is you were only ever going to open the box again to put the instructions back in the box. I think that's what you said. I mean, since then, I have gone back and I've revisited it again. I don't think my opinions kind of changed. I think it was a case of, and I see games kind of making things look pretty, but not actually looking at the practical elements. There could have been things that they could have improved. But it's like they decided to improve a car by adding extra fluffy dice instead of fixing the brakes,
right?
Kind of thing. And I don't know if you've decided if Tang Garden has been left to the side and if you're not going to touch it again, or if you would kind of go back and play.
Yeah, I'm definitely done with it. But I love the idea that you've added like LED underglow instead of making sure the steering works on the car. Like, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And that was an example of a game where the overproduction went the wrong direction. As in, they overproduced something where they could have
actively hurt the game.
Yeah, it really, it was a real shame, because the principles of the game and everything like that, I really enjoyed it. When I was reading it, I thought, I can see how this works. And then practical point, I was like, looking at other people, and they were just like, this is so much harder than it needs to be.
Right.
I'm just still stuck on this metaphor. It's like, we've got $50,000, and people say the steering is garbage, but what if it glows?
Right.
Like,
it's like that whole thing.
Yeah,
you've got two cup holders.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I need to put on the full beam in order to indicate that I'm going left. I know, but the left-hand cup holder heats your coffee again.
Right.
One of the games that I wanted to bring up as a game that we've loved on the podcast and espoused is Crazy Wordz. Crazy Wordz has the worst production I have ever seen, but it's also a $7 or $8 on Amazon. But I just feel like this game is a quintessential party game that could get so much more love if the letter tiles were Scrabble pieces. I'd recommend Crazy Wordz to anyone, but when you open the box and start looking at it, it's just annoying and small and gross. And so I just see a game like Crazy Wordz that's got, two Z's in it, both in crazy and in words. You might not think that there's even one Z, but you'd be wrong, because there are two Z's in Crazy Wordz.
And when you see that Z at the end, you probably think it's a Knizia game, but it actually is not, contrary to popular belief.
You mean Z?
Yeah. Yes. And Krazy has a U in it. It's Krauzy. Crazy Wordz.
Wordz has got a U in it as well.
Absolutely. just a game that the production choices were baffling, and to me almost seemed to indicate that they didn't think the game was good or something. All right, Neelan, what you got for us?
So something that Mark had said earlier about Castles of Burgundy and what you were saying about Crazy Words reminded me of Sidereal Confluence, which is a game that I think deserves better production. I mean, it's a game that we love. I mean, again, it was our game of the year in the year it came out, but I don't think its production does it any favors. And I think I would be curious to see if the new version, which is going to have better art and hopefully better graphic design, is actually going to translate into having a bigger reach. Because I think it's still quite a niche game that deserves a much bigger audience, frankly. But I don't know if production alone is going to get them what they would hopefully want out of it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because if that game was already game of the year for many people, and so you add that extra layer of paint and production because there's so many little cubes and bits. So I hope it's not just a new paint job, right?
No, it needs graphic design work, Frank. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Well, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. We are saying goodbye to the TT Tank, the Tartan Tank, the Mr. Wizard, the Richard Simpson, the Gandalf of board games. Richard, where can people find you online to talk more about board games with you?
If they want to talk to me, they can find me on all the different places. Worn Out Faces, bright and early for the daily races. If they go to Google and they search for We're Not Wizards, you'll find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And if you go to YouTube, you can watch our videos. And if you want to read our reviews, you can go to we'renotwizards.co.uk. If you want to listen to over 500 hours of podcasts with my two least favourite members of the Board Game Barrage and my almost favourite member who's yet to come on yet, Mark, then you can go to we'renotwizards.com.
I was going to say it's very appropriate that we have Richard on our production episode because if there is a Mr. Production in the board game field, it is Richard. He's relentless. He's got so much content out there. So I would definitely advise anyone listening to check out We're Not Wizards. He does a lot of great work.
Yeah, and we can include a link, I think, to Neelan's interview and my interview in the show notes. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of those two is really good, and we'll leave it up to you guys to let us know which one that is.
They were all really good.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
No, thank you for having us, Richard. I think it's a little surreal to me. Even back when we did that first interview together, it was a long time ago in board game time. For some reason in my mind, it feels like a different generation, and now we're here together at home on Board Game Barrage.
Board Game Barrage. And now I see you all over Board Game Geek, and I see that you've taken my advice that I gave you at the very beginning and you've ran with it and you've grown, and it's almost like I'm seeing you running off on the beach by yourself on your horse, and I'm just going with tears in my eyes, you go guys, you go my tanks. I'm so proud. I'm proud with lots of rolling R's.
I really appreciate Richard. Kellen told me the advice that you gave him, and I think that really helped our show. The advice being to push the green tank to the front. I think that was the turning point, sort of like the...
All right, kids. 3 kids and 1 adult. This is, I feel like Neelan, all of his many children. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You can talk to us on Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. One of the things you can do for us is leave a review of the podcast. We haven't seen too many new reviews in the current time, and we'd love them. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? Thank you all. Hope you're staying safe, and happy gaming. Bye.
Bye.
You all got a lot to hear. I mean, I think the biggest problem with America, and I think the reason you could sort yourselves out, is if you started spelling your letters and your words with U's in them, because you're missing out the letter U.
Yep.
Neelan has been a big proponent of that.
I've long said that taking the U out of the language was America's downfall.
There's no USA without a U.
Yeah.
They took the U out of the language and they put it into themselves. So all they go about is they just think about how it's all about them. It's all about you in America.
Yeah.
And if they took that out and started putting them in the words, then everything would be fine. Colour looks ridiculous. Savour looks ridiculous. Flavour looks ridiculous. Don't even get me started on how you even pronounce aluminium as well. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Wait, where are you on that, Neelan?
I'm going to be contrarian about that, Richard, because I believe aluminum is actually the original pronunciation, is what I've since learned.
I don't care where you're from, contrary land. It's aluminium. It is. It's named after the person called Alphonse.
Yep.
Uminium.
Uminium, yeah. I miss him.
Shortened it down to Al. Because Alphonse Uminium sounded like a jazz band. This is where you are, Kellen. You asked me on the show. Your structure is gone.
I think you did see the look in my eyes as I realized what I'd be wrangling. I was trying to decide if you were sheep or children.
We're switching to an all etymology podcast, right? That's our thing now?
Yep.
I'm going to go. You don't lead. I go where I want. And if you get in my face, I'm going to be like that. That's how it's going to be. Preferably some kind of maybe a dark red or a dull brown or
adult red.
A dull colour that's going to cover the blood that's obviously going to be running from my head as I get repeatedly smacked across the face.
My question is, why would he be wearing a wizard hat?
Why would I be wearing a wizard hat?
They're not wizards.
Exactly.
Oh, we're the wizards who've been on his show, which is everyone but you, Mark.
Oh, I thought you weren't wizards either. Oh, no, you made the declaration that you were a wizard, Colin. Did you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. That's all outro garbage.
That's all right in the middle.
No, that is outro garbage. I do declare. So there's no transition, Richard. There's no transition. What? Okay, thank you for choosing Tartan Tank or TT, as we like to call you, or Wizard TT or Mr. Wizard. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we're going to be talking about. I think it's especially. What's the word for pronounced, but that sounds smarter? Relevant? No. There's like a...
What are you trying to say?
Well, I'm trying to sound smart, Mark.
Well, I know. I'm trying to help you, as I usually do.
Yeah, I mean, what's the sentence with the wrong word?
There's smarter words, but that's fine. It's fine. People know I'm smart. I don't need to use smart words.
Well, agree to disagree.
There were good jokes about children in there, but I don't know. And then there
were probably less than you imagine.
Cool. Anyway, everyone feel good? Anything else we need? No. I feel good.
Yeah, I feel good too.
Richard?
No.
TT
no,
Tank? Tartan Tank?
No, I think you need everything, I think you need a proper... You're listening to the Board Game Barrage podcast, and Gandalf loves you.
There you go. That's perfect.
Well, now we have
it. Now we have it. Yeah, exactly. I love it.